So, regarding the topic, and we begin to wrap up here, what exactly would you say to someone that is, don't want to say necessarily an introvert, but just someone who has that trepidation regarding meeting new people, or just being a friend, a good friend, or a better friend, or a more active friend to their current friends? What would you say to someone like that?
I think everyone's different. I think that we are like creatures that were designed for community, right? But I think everyone has a different bandwidth for the amount of community, right? I don't know for sure, but it does feel like that when a community does get too big, it's really difficult to have like personal connections, right? So then what ends up happening is that you form closer circles, right? But regardless, I think that we are like social creatures, right? There's all kinds of like kind of funny stuff even online. Like you can look up like these like social experiments, like where like people are like when I watched a while back was just like somebody, uh, it was like this, it was like a panel of like 6 people, and only one person was actually like not in on the experiment. Right? So they had 6 people, and one person, they would show them like a question, and at first everyone, they would answer the question and they would kind of get it right, and the person would get it right. There's no, but eventually they switched and they gave an obvious wrong answer, right? But they would go one by one. It's like, oh, it's A, and it's obviously not A, right? And then the next person would be like, it's A, and it's like that's obviously not right. And the other person's like, it's A. And so like now there's like conformity in there, right? And so then it gets to the person that the experiment is kind of on, right? And they go, oh, sometimes they're just like it's A, you know what I mean? Because I think maybe, but I think there's like this, that's like a weakness of like social order, right? Like this kind of stuff. But I think that it kind of goes into a way of like kind of showing that we are like social creatures. Like it does, we do feed off of, not feed off of, but like we do play off of like what else is going around like in our environment. And so part of it makes me think that that's why it's so important to find people that are genuine.
Yeah.
Right? To find people that are like, that do have faith and that do have like strength of character to be courageous in their, in their thankfulness and in, what they do. Because I don't think it's necessarily healthy for somebody to constantly be telling you like yes.
Yeah.
Right? But everybody's bandwidth is different, and some people will just really only need maybe 1 or 2 people, right? Some people need a lot more. Some people can handle more or handle less. You know what I mean? So it just kind of depends. But when it comes to that, I think that oftentimes, like when you think about people who are introverted, it is hard to distinguish whether or not it is an actual feeling of wanting to be isolated versus just simply like convenience or laziness. You know what I mean? I think I'm oftentimes when I feel introverted, it is the convenience and laziness, right? Like it's just like I feel like I want to just stay home.
And put that label on you. Say, I'm an introvert. I'm just
Right, yeah. But it's like not really. I'm not really an introvert, right?
Right.
I think most people are kind of a mix of the two. Like people just like their, like you kind of even need some me time, right? Some alone time, some times to kind of gather. Because if you're with somebody constantly doing something and you're constantly giving of yourself, I think there can be a lot of growth there. But just like anyone would tell you, like there are periods of rest that need to happen, right, for growth to actually be sustainable, right? And so I think that's as important as like having friends and like going out and doing these social things, right? But I think sometimes looking at it objectively and it's like, okay, is this something just because I'm tired? You know what I mean? And that's what's going on? Or is it that there is something that's a little more ingrained in me that doesn't like people? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it could be often that because you were hurt by something before, right? There could be things. And I would say to that kind of stuff is that I think that is kind of very obviously, it's logical, but not necessarily healthy, right? I think that would be kind of outside the norm of what you would expect for somebody to do. So like if that is the case, then that might be something worth trying to bolster your courage and go out and participate. And when I say participate, it doesn't have to be that you go to like a huge party, right?
Yeah.
It can just be like go have coffee with somebody, right? Or just have a conversation with somebody, or invite somebody over to your house, that kind of thing, just something. It doesn't have to be like a huge thing, right? Because there's benefits in having community, right? There's benefits in having like a family, for one, right? Part of it is like I do have my wife and my kids, and we have our community, but there's a lot of stuff that goes on, and there's a lot of things that we like build within that community, but I can't necessarily rely on my wife and my kids to like be there for everything for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So because of that, often I'll go wherever it is that I do live, and I'll try to build kind of subconsciously, I think. I haven't really thought about it until we start having these conversations, right?
Yeah.
But kind of building a family, right? So that I can pour myself out, but also I think there's a real benefit of just being able to talk to somebody in a non-surface level way that isn't part of necessarily a committed relationship like a wife, right? Or like sons, right? I can be vulnerable with them for sure, and I am, right? But I think there's something very different about just having somebody, because you are kind of in that bubble with them. So sometimes it's hard to gain perspective, even in your vulnerability, just because like my wife, most of the time, she is her own person, but most of the time we're experiencing kind of very similar issues, right? That we're facing, like external issues that are facing our family, right? We're tackling stuff together, we're figuring out stuff together. But sometimes you really do just need like an external perspective to kind of like, oh, I didn't really see that, or you have experiences that I don't have. You know what I mean? My brother, my actual brother. You know what I mean? Friends. I have conversations with people all the time that just don't believe what I believe. And I think that the bringing in that perspective helps me either figure out what I do believe. It strengthens what I believe, or it will sometimes alter or shift what I believe, because I really do, when it comes to that kind of stuff, I really do want to be more aligned with the truth, right? I want to be as true in actual fact, in reality, as I possibly can, right? Because I think that this is kind of getting more into the religious aspect when it comes to like truth, that I think that if you're seeking that above most things, it's almost like, despite what does happen, it's probably the best thing to happen. It's a long conversation, I think, but I think that's kind of really the benefit of having that community, right? Because if you're just by yourself, a lot of times, like isolating yourself, there's gonna probably, you can almost guarantee that there's going to be very little growth, right? Yeah. Some people will seek out growth through like other means other than like humans, right? Yeah. Or it's through humans, but maybe through the written word, right? So a lot of people will read books, and I think that's great. You know what I mean? Like I do think that like reading is like a huge thing, because you're gaining the perspective of somebody that you would maybe otherwise never have met, right? But I don't know necessarily if that's the only thing. That's like one avenue of it, right? Same way that I think that it's not like really necessarily great to just like only conversate with people that are around you, right? Or only have conversations and never bother to like read or study anything else in the broader sense. You know what I mean? I think it's kind of all tied together. And so sometimes you just need somebody with an outside perspective, to kind of help you inform a decision or to help you grow.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we all as humans have a propensity to create echo chambers, and then when you isolate yourself, you got an echo seat or whatever,
Yeah, right.